Today, we're tackling a big one. We're breaking down one of the most pivotal and frankly devastating events in American history, the Civil War. We're going to look at how a nation literally turned on itself, the incredible cost of that conflict, and what it all means for us today.
So, to really get a sense of the scale we're talking about, let me start with a question for you. Of all the wars America has ever fought, which one do you think was the deadliest?
The answer? The Civil War. And it's not even close. An estimated 700,000 soldiers died. To put that in perspective, that's more than all other American wars combined all the way through Vietnam. It's just a staggering, almost unimaginable loss of life.
So how on earth did this happen? Well, here's our game plan. We'll start with the divisions that were tearing the country apart, then move to the first shots and the brutal reality of the conflict. We'll cover the huge turning points, the final campaigns, and then we'll wrap up by looking at the war's powerful legacy. Okay, let's get into it.
First up, we got to rewind a bit to the decades leading up to the war. See, this conflict didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was more like a pressure cooker, with these deep, fundamental divisions building and building for years. You know, by the middle of the 1800s, America was basically two different countries living under one flag. In the North, you had this booming industrial economy and a growing abolitionist movement that was getting louder and louder about ending slavery. But in the South, you had a completely different world, an economy built almost entirely on agriculture, which was completely dependent on the labor of enslaved people. This wasn't just a lifestyle difference. It was a head-on collision of two opposing systems.
And look, if you want to know why they fought, you don't have to guess. The historical documents are incredibly clear. In their own words, right here in Mississippi's Declaration of Secession, they said their position was thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. They called it the greatest material interest of the world. They couldn't have been more direct about it.
So you have all this tension, building and building for decades. And the thing that finally lit the fuse? Well, it wasn't a battle. It was an election.
When Abraham Lincoln won the presidency in November of 1860, that was the last straw for many in the South. Just a month later, South Carolina was out. And then it was like dominoes falling. Boom, boom, boom. 6 more states followed and formed the Confederacy. The country was already broken, already split in two, before a single shot was even fired at Fort Sumter. That attack just made it official.
Once Fort Sumter was attacked, that was it. The time for talking was over. A huge wave of patriotism swept through both the North and the South, and they geared up for a fight. Nobody had any idea just how long or how incredibly brutal this war was about to become.
Now, if you were a betting person and you just looked at the stats on paper, this would seem like a total mismatch. The Union had more than double the population, way more railroad tracks to move troops and supplies, and an incredible 90% of the country's manufacturing. I mean, the North was just built for a long fight. The South's only real shot was to win quickly.
But as we all know, wars aren't fought on paper. Despite all those advantages, the first couple of years were a real meat grinder, especially out in the East. You had these horrific battles with shocking casualties, but no one could land a knockout blow. The Confederacy, with brilliant generals like Robert E. Lee, often ran circles around much larger Union armies.
Okay, so for 2 years, it's this bloody back and forth. Then comes 1863. And this year, this is the game changer. This is when everything, both militarily and morally, starts to shift in a huge way.
First up, a huge political move. On New Year's Day, Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. And this was a masterstroke. Suddenly, this isn't just a war to hold the country together anymore. It is now officially a war to end slavery. And just as critically, it allowed nearly 200,000 African-American men to enlist in the Union Army, which was a massive boost in manpower.
And right on the heels of this moral turning point came 2 absolute knockout punches on the battlefield. In July, Union forces stopped Lee's invasion of the North at Gettysburg, the bloodiest battle of the entire war. And almost at the exact same time, way out west, General Ulysses S. Grant captured the fortress city of Vicksburg. This gave the Union total control of the Mississippi River, literally slicing the Confederacy in half.
Okay, we're covering a lot of ground pretty fast here. If you're finding this kind of historical breakdown helpful, and you appreciate how we're connecting all these dots, do me a quick favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help us make more of these deep dives for our U.S. history playlist.
So, after the disasters of 1863, the Confederacy is on the ropes. But they're not out of the fight yet. The Union, now with General Grant in charge of everything, decides it's time to stop messing around and press every single advantage with a new, absolutely relentless strategy.
Grant's plan was simple, and it was brutal. It's known as total war. The idea was to hit the Confederacy from all sides all at once. So while Grant himself was hammering away at Lee's army in Virginia, he sent another general, William T. Sherman, to just tear through the heart of the South. Sherman's march was all about destroying their ability to make war, burning farms, wrecking railroads, you name it. It wasn't just about beating their armies anymore. It was about breaking their will to fight.
And this strategy, it worked. After Sherman burned Atlanta and marched to the sea, and after Grant locked Lee's army in a brutal 10-month siege, it was over. Lee's army was starving, exhausted, and completely surrounded. On April 9, 1865, he met General Grant at a small farmhouse in Appomattox Courthouse and surrendered, which effectively brought the Civil War to an end.
So the fighting's over. The guns go silent. But in a lot of ways, the hardest part was just beginning. Now the country had to figure out how to put itself back together, how to rebuild a totally devastated South, and, most importantly, what freedom would actually mean for 4 million people who are no longer enslaved. On paper, at least, the results were monumental. 3 new amendments were added to the Constitution. The 13th abolished slavery, for good. The 14th granted citizenship to everyone born in the U.S. and promised equal protection under the law. And the 15th said you couldn't deny someone the right to vote based on their race. These are the Reconstruction Amendments, and they completely changed the definition of American citizenship.
But winning the war on the battlefield is one thing. Winning the battle over its memory, well, that's a whole other story. An idea called the Lost Cause started to pop up, which was basically an attempt to rewrite history. It tried to paint the Confederacy as a noble, heroic cause that was all about states' rights, not slavery, even though, as we saw, their own documents said the exact opposite. This myth has had a really long and damaging impact on how we remember the war. And that kind of brings us to today. The Civil War answered some huge questions. It settled that the country was one nation, indivisible, and it abolished slavery. But it left us with even bigger questions. Questions about equality, justice, and race that, in so many ways, we are still wrestling with. The echoes of this conflict are all around us.
Understanding this history is so crucial to understanding America right now. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. If you want to keep connecting the dots, be sure to check out our full playlist on big events in U.S. history. We've got deep dives on the American Revolution, the Great Depression, and a lot more. Thanks for watching.